Good morning. So it's really a pleasure to be back at this meeting. It's really grown over the years, and it's been great to see it. I do think bioresorbable technology is definitely a game changer. We have seen a number of failed baloney trials in the DCB space, failed stent trials, and so the fact that we now have one of these available on the market is really a big plus for us and our patients. And so I think the title is appropriate as a game changer for tibial interventions. Obviously, there are a number of challenges to successful percutaneous tibial intervention. These are listed here. Essentially, what you have are both a composite of mechanical challenges of recoil, plaque burden, that sort of thing, and the issue of biologic restenosis. So we both have a mechanical problem and a biological problem, that intimal hyperplasia that develops in our areas of intervention, as well as residual plaque burden and those sort of things. Up until recently, this is really what we had for treating the tibial space. We had balloon angioplasty and atherectomy as on-label solutions. These each have their problems. They address maybe some of these two, one component. They each address one component of these two factors, but not the other. Certainly not the issue of biologic restenosis. We can deal with biologic restenosis with coronary DES. There have been a number of small randomized controlled trials in Europe mostly that looked at this modality against other modalities. The problem, of course, in the U.S. is that these are off-label. They come in short stents. And really, for surgeons' perspective, they result in a permanent implant that can limit further options down the road. So in some ways, an ideal problem or ideal solution to this problem is a bioresorbable scaffold that allows drug to elute over time, preventing the restenosis, provides scaffolding to deal with dissections or plaque burden, but ultimately goes away or dissolves over time, leaving a healed, healthy artery that even could potentially accept a bypassed distal anastomosis. Probably the device that is furthest ahead in this game is the Esprit BTK scaffold, and I'll talk a little bit more about the Life BTK trial in just a moment. But this is a PLLA backbone with strut thickness similar to Xience, has a coating that allows for slow elution of everolimus over time. This was evaluated in the Life BTK randomized controlled trial, 261 patients randomized in a 2-to-1 fashion, with the endpoints shown here. We presented this data at TCT at 12 months, and it's been published in the New England Journal. In terms of the endpoints, the primary efficacy endpoint was a composite of limb salvage and primary patency. This included a metric of binary restenosis determined by duplex. And so because that was somewhat of a novel endpoint, we also wanted to do two powered secondary endpoints. One was that issue of binary restenosis by itself. The second was the composite endpoint of freedom from above ankle amputation, total occlusion of the target vessel, CDTLR, and binary restenosis, but with that binary restenosis component pulled out. The safety endpoint was a standard male powder major adverse limb events at 6 months and perioperative death at 30 days. This is the primary efficacy endpoint that again we showed back in the fall, and what we saw at 12 months is that we had a dramatic improvement in primary patency in the primary composite endpoint, 74% for the scaffold versus 47% for the PTA arm, a 30% absolute difference, a very highly statistically significant difference. When we looked at other factors, one other factor, when we look at this same curve on a landmark analysis, we see that the displaying of these curves really occurs at 6 months, showing the benefit of that anti-restenotic property in addition to the benefit we get from the mechanical aspect of the scaffolding. Looking at the two powered secondary endpoints, binary restenosis alone certainly drove a lot of the endpoint, 25% difference between PTA and the scaffold. But even if we took that out and did what would be more traditional or standard endpoint for the primary endpoint, we saw a 14% difference between these two arms. So in all of these different metrics or different ways of looking at the endpoint, we saw a very effective device compared to PTA. Primary safety endpoint, no difference between the two. And when we looked at a number of subgroup analyses, just a couple are listed here, sex, race, region, et cetera, we found that in all of these categories, the analysis favored the scaffold over PTA. So the device works across a wide range of lesions, presentations, and patient demographics. This ultimately led to FDA approval of the Esprit scaffold. This is my first case shortly after approval. Single vessel runoff to the foot, but it was discontinuous. The perineal was discontinuous at this level here. Crossed this through, couldn't cross antegrade, so crossed retrograde, and ballooned, and then placed the scaffold with a nice result. So this has really become a mainstay of treatment, at least in my practice. I use these in most of my tibial interventions at this point. There are some constraints in terms of where we place these devices. Certainly in the trial, we had a lot of constraints on that, and we're seeing now as we expand the use of this how it functions in other territories. So Abbott Vascular is the company behind the Esprit Scaffold and Life BTK trial. They're not the only ones in this game, however. There's a couple other companies that are coming up closely behind. Riva Medical, excuse me, R3 Vascular, and I'll just briefly talk about each of those. So maybe the next one that we'll see, or I'd say that the closest contender here is the Motive Scaffold by Riva Medical. This is a proprietary Tyrocore bioresorbable polymer structure, elutes a limus drug, sirolimus. It's different from the Esprit Scaffold in the sense that it has an iodinated compound here on the molecule that allows for visualization of this device. The visualization of this device under fluoroscopy, which really is a difference from the Esprit Scaffold. It also has a relatively high tensile strength that allows it a little bit wider range of post-dilatation than Esprit. This is designed to have full vasomotor restoration at 12 months and resolve completely by 4 years. Diameter range is I'll show in a minute. Similar strut thickness to the Esprit Scaffold. Again, I mentioned the higher tensile strength compared to PLLA backbone struts or backbone scaffolds. And this probably gives it some of the post-dilatation range. So, for example, with an Esprit, you can go up by 0.5 millimeters. With this scaffold, you can dilate to about 0.75 millimeters higher. And this just shows the difference in visibility between a PLLA backbone, which has these couple of platinum marker beads for visualization, compared to a DES or the Motive Scaffold, which looks a little bit more like DES under fluoroscopy. This device goes through hydrolysis and then other cellular metabolism steps, degraded into benign degradants that are then excreted. And one of the differences between these two scaffolds is unclear whether this is which is more advantageous. The Tyrocore scaffold basically sort of loses volume over time, whereas the PLLA scaffolds maintain their volume as they degrade, but they become somewhat less porous or less dense, so it keeps the structure a little bit more intact as it's degrading. This device already has CE mark, but it's now undergoing a randomized controlled trial through the FDA breakthrough designation pathway, with Aaron Armstrong and Andre Schmidt being the US and OUS PIs. Their target enrollment of 292 patients is probably going to be met within a month. There are at somewhere around 270 patients, I believe, at this point through centers in the US and Europe. The Resolve scaffold, I'll just briefly mention this. The Resolve 1 trial looking at the Magnitude scaffold by R3 Vascular. This is also an ultra-high molecular weight PLLA structure with sirolimus solution, very high radial force versus coronary DES with maintained support beyond 1 year, unlike the other two scaffolds. Similar strut thickness and lengths up to about 58 millimeters intended. And so this has been evaluated in a single-arm, first-in-human European study with reasonably good results. The next step will be a US IDE trial, which they're underway in planning at this point and will be probably coming shortly. So in conclusion, bioresorbable technology allows for mechanical support of a vessel and anti-restenotic therapy without leaving a permanent implant in tibial vessels. The Esprit scaffold has been proven effective in the Life BTK randomized trial and may represent a major advance in BTK therapy. I think additional devices that are entering the clinical trial evaluation period currently may offer some additional advantages over the standard PLLA type of devices. Thank you very much.